Hi, I'm Wendy with H2OBungalow.com. Today, I'm going to share with you how I updated my built-in cabinets for under $100 by giving them a fresh coat of paint, removing the traditional cabinet doors, and building mini barn doors in a shaker style. You can download my instructions and supply list at H2OBungalow.com. Search built-ins. This project was sponsored by HomeRight's Super Finish Max Paint Sprayer. I would have used it even without the sponsorship since it's the best way to get a smooth, high-quality finish, and it's much quicker than painting by hand. To paint your built-ins, you'll need a Super Finish Max Paint Sprayer, extra paint containers, paint and primer, painter's tape, and masking paper, drop cloths, simple green, a respirator and face mask, and of course your safety goggles. Alrighty then, so let's get started. The first thing you'll do is remove everything from the room. Use a drill to remove the cabinet doors, take off the shelves, remove any hardware or shelf clips. Next, you'll wipe every surface thoroughly with simple green and a clean painter's rag. This will remove dust, grease, and degloss the surface at the same time. To be sure your surface is completely clean and your paint sticks properly, rewipe each area until the rag comes up clean after wiping. Be sure to get the sides, shelves, and top of the shelves and the cabinets too. Next, you'll mask off completely around the built-ins. It's a lot easier to mask with 2 layers of painter's tape. The first one gets good coverage to be sure no paint will spray onto anything, and the second attaches the masking paper. For the ceiling, I cut squares and pre-taped the edges first. Then I lined up the tape and pressed the edges to the ceiling. It's a fast and easy time saver. To mask the walls, I pre-taped the top and sides of the paper, left it on the roll, and placed it on the wall, letting the paper unroll onto the floor. Then, I cut the length and taped it all around the edges. Don't forget to go back over and tape any gaps, outlets, and cover wires like cables. Use Saran or press and seal to cover wires and cables. It makes the job much easier. Overspray can settle like fine dust in a room, so be sure to cover the entrance if you don't have a door. Cover your floor and furniture with masking paper and drop cloths. I set up a table outside to mix my paint. I pre-filled 2 containers with paint or primer diluted to the consistency of medium pancake batter. I filled a third paint container with water to spray through the Super Finish Max between coats. That's another huge time saver. Using a Super Finish Max paint sprayer is easy. Adjust the paint flow by moving the dial up and down. Adjust the paint pattern on the nozzle to a horizontal or vertical pattern. And pull the paint trigger to start the paint flow. Always do a test spray and make adjustments needed before painting your project. Since the shelves were stained with water-based but dark stain, I used a water-based primer and applied 2 coats to the built-ins. I let each one dry in between. I had the primer tinted a light gray, which helps the white apply more evenly. I set the sprayer for a vertical paint spray pattern to paint these built-ins. You want a thin, even coat of paint to prevent drips, and it's best to work from the top down. In tight corners, in areas that I couldn't get well with the paint sprayer, I applied paint with a paintbrush. I did this before I added the top coat onto the shelves. When applying paint with a paint sprayer, you want to go back and forth in long, even motions with your arms and not with your wrists to get an even, thin coat of paint. I applied 2 coats of ultra-white semi-gloss latex paint. I used the same color white for all the trim in my house. It's easy to remember. I'll never have to have colors matched or mixed, and it's always a fresh, crisp white. Be sure to remove the painter's tape and masking when the paint is dry to the touch. If you let it dry and sit overnight, it may lift some of the new paint with it. While my paint was drying and curing, I started working on the doors. The supplies you'll need for the doors are 1/2 inch plywood, 1x4 select pine boards, wood glue, caulk, mini barn door hardware, and edge banding. The tools you'll need are a miter saw, a table saw, a drill, a brad nailer, a sander, a household iron, a tape measure, and a level. The lower cabinets of my built-ins are 45 inches wide. I made them with a 12-inch and a 30-inch upper kitchen cabinet. You can find this tutorial on the blog also. My doors are 13 7/8 by 27 3/4 inches. I built 2 doors for each built-in shelf and used mini barn door hardware to hang them. To make the doors, I ripped a 1/2-inch sheet of plywood for the door backs and then ripped strips for the trim. You can find all the dimensions on my website. I sanded the cut edges of the trim before using wood glue and brad nails to attach them to the back of the plywood. I added a few more brad nails to the back of the door and then filled in all the nail holes with a little wood filler. Then sanded each door one more time around the edges, the front, and the back. Next, I used 7/8 inch white birch edge banding around the outside edge of each door. Cut the pieces a little larger than what you need, attach with an iron set on dry, high heat, press the wood veneer firmly to seal it, and when it cools, trim it with a utility knife. I covered the long sides first and the short sides second. They were easier to work on while standing on the ground. Prep the doors for painting by wiping them down completely with a painter's rag followed by a clean tack cloth to remove the last of the sanding dust particles. I elevated the barn door header and new trim pieces for the built-ins so no paint would pool underneath. The doors were set across 1x3s on sawhorses to paint. Use your safety goggles and a respirator even when painting outside. Like before, do a test spray and adjust the flow and direction of your paint spray before starting to paint. I gave my doors 3 coats of paint, allowing each coat to dry to the touch before adding another coat. Use the same back and forth motion when spraying, moving your arms with the sprayer to apply the paint. I turned the doors to get good coverage at the cut sides of the trim and the door edges. Last, I moved on to paint the header for the barn doors and the trim at the same time. Once the paint was dry, I added the painted 1x4 headers to the front of the cabinets. They were tucked directly under the countertops and secured with 2-inch wood screws. Drilling pilot holes first ensured that the wood didn't split. The rail was a few inches longer than I needed. I trimmed each end down a bit with a grinder and a metal cutting blade. I gave it a quick coat of black spray paint afterwards so you couldn't tell. Installing barn door hardware is pretty easy. I have an in-depth video tutorial on building a barn door and installing hardware in my YouTube channel and on the blog. Next, I drilled pilot holes onto the doors for the hardware and attached the rollers to the top of each door. I attached the rail to the header using pilot holes, attaching the center first, then using a level to fine-tune the other 2 bolt locations makes the job much easier. Next, add the bumper guards and the door guides. The last thing I did was give the trim and the built-ins a once-over with painter's caulk to seal any gaps by our crooked ceiling or other spots that needed some fill. I did this entire makeover through a weekend for just under $100 and completely transformed the look and the room that my built-ins are in. Again, you can download the complete set of instructions with links to the supplies I've used from my blog post at h2obungalow.com, search built-ins. There's also a link to my blog post in the description of this video on YouTube also. If you liked this project, please give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to my blog when you're there too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next creative DIY project.